Hi everyone, it's Nichol Spohr for Spellbinders with the Summer Felt Stitch and Create Cheeky Apple. The Cheeky Apple can be stitched in a couple of different ways. Plus, I'm going to show this photo of how I stitched it flat to create a fun little pillow. We're going to be doing the basic assembly directions for both the apple with the open apple look or with the cheeky apple look. For the Felt Stitch and Create Apple, you have the front piece, or it can be the front and back, plus we have the front piece with the layering piece so that it looks like an open apple. I love that this is so versatile and you can stitch it in a couple of different ways. Included is the piece for the stem and the seeds, arms if you want to make him cheeky, the face pieces including eyes, cheeks, and mouth, and a couple of different leaf designs. Also, there is this wonderful floral with a flower center and this wonderful little piece that you can fold in half, roll, and it creates this dimensional flower center with these loops. This is one of my favorite little pieces from this set, and please feel free to mix and match it with your other Felt Stitch and Create pieces. Let's go ahead and get started stitching. First, we're going to take the layering piece for the front of the apple, plus I have another piece that I am using for the inside of the plush shape. We want to stitch the outer or the outside edge, I guess, and the detail for our Felt Stitch and Create Cheeky Apple, Open Apple design. I want to line up the stitching holes and we are going to start stitching. When stitching, I like to use 3 strands of embroidery floss, and I stitch all the way around, going up and down every other stitching hole until I get to where I started, and then I reverse, filling in all of those areas. Now you may have noticed on the photos of the finished pillow, I stitched those slightly different. You can mix it up and stitch in other ways if you want to. This is the basic stitching directions for how I stitch most of the time. There's always those times that decorative stitches can add so much to the finished look of your shape. I'm using matching embroidery floss to go all the way around in color 3365. I'm going to continue stitching, as I mentioned, up and down, matching up the stitching holes in the layering piece with the base piece until I get back to where I started. Now there's always those cases where I can tell that I'm probably not going to have enough embroidery floss to go all the way around my apple. Or maybe I might, but I decided to just stitch half and then reverse and go back to where I started, and then I'll stitch the other half, reverse, and go back to where I started to fill in the second half of the apple. It's really a call up to you. In this case, I kind of was afraid maybe I wasn't going to have quite enough, even though I probably would have had enough to go around one time, tie it off, and then do another set of 3 strands of floss and go around again. But this is a very good example. Let's say if you're doing a shape and you can tell you're not going to have enough embroidery floss, you can always start in one area and only go a partial way around the design, come back and fill in those spots, and then you can tie it off really nicely on the back. I always like to kind of grab those 2 edges, tie it off like you're seeing me do here, snip those ends, and then I'm simply going to thread up my needle with a little extra floss. I think I even started maybe. I always do try to use up as much embroidery floss as possible. I don't want to waste any. So this may have been pieced in several sections, but I always like to be transparent and show you exactly how I am doing this. Now the reason we go up and down every other hole instead of a traditional backstitch, for anyone who might be familiar with backstitching in needlework, is that this allows your stitches to lay as nicely on the front as on the back. Yes, this particular layer is going to be hidden between the two layers of the apple, but if you get in the habit of stitching this way with your felt designs, when you're stitching dimensional felt shapes, your stitches always look beautiful. I have really trained myself when stitching with felt to do it this way, and I'm always pleased with the final result. I think this is going to be so cute. So let's go ahead and finish stitching up the apple. Not only do we have the outer edge of this apple design, but for the open apple, we also have that center line and then the seeds that go in the center. So we are going to want to stitch that little straight line up the center and then that oval shape that goes around the seeds. This provides some wonderful detail for our finished apple shape. So as I finish and going around the perimeter of the inside of our apple, we are then going to start stitching down and stitching in that oval shape. I did go ahead and get a new piece of floss. Again, 3 strands, and I am using a sharp tip needle. I recommend a nice sharp tip needle when working with felt. When you're piercing through the die cut stitched holes, it really doesn't make a difference, but there are those times that you might be stitching something through a piece of felt that doesn't have the holes. Let's say, for example, you're stitching the felt snowy owl together and you want to stitch the head to the body. I always kind of drop the head down a little bit, and this goes for any of the critters, and I don't follow the stitching holes per se, but I sandwich the body of the critter between the head pieces, and so piercing through that felt is much easier with a sharp tip needle. We're following the same steps that we used for the perimeter of the apple and simply filling in every single one of these stitching holes. Now the seeds are so cute and tiny, and those are going to be placed right in the center of our apple. When you're working with a two-sided plush shape, I would like you to think about the shape as a front and a back. That means stitch everything for the front of the piece at one time as it's flat. Stitch anything that may go on the back of the shape at one time, again, while it's flat. And then you're going to take the two halves of the whole, place them together, and stitch them together, which is what I'm going to do for both of my apples here today. If you think about it as two individual pieces and then you bring them together, I think it makes it a lot easier for the finished design. With our adorable teeny tiny little seeds, there are stitching holes in these that line up with both of the pieces. So we are simply going to thread those through, and then I'm just tying it into a little knot on the back of each apple, and then snipping them with some sharp embroidery snips. We're going to go ahead, thread the second seed, stitch that in place following the stitching holes, and then we'll just tie this into a little knot to secure. For this, I'm not super concerned with how the back looks because it will be sandwiched between the two halves. Okay, next we're going to work on putting it all together. We're going to sandwich the stem and some batting in between the two layers of apple. For stitching the two layers together, I like to start in between the layers with my needle, and we are going to stitch up and down again every other stitching hole all the way around, this time sandwiching the stem between the two layers, just like this, and that's going to secure the stem. And we're also stitching it together. I make sure and stitch all the way around, and when I get back to where I started, I believe in this case, I probably come back between the 2 layers and tie a little knot, thread up 3 more strands of embroidery floss and stitch around again starting in between the 2 layers, simply because I believe it needs a little bit more floss than what I have here to start with. And if you start with too long strands of floss, they can get tangled rather easily. I generally like to err on the side of caution and not have too long of strands of floss, but do whatever feels good to you. We're going to continue to stitch up and down every single hole until we get back to where we started. As you're stitching, just try to remember to go straight up and down, keeping your tension not tight but not loose either. You want to be really careful that you're not pulling super hard against the stitching holes out towards the end. I try to keep my needle straight up and down with those stitching holes, as you'll notice. I may flip my wrist back and forth, making sure that I am lining it up with the stitching holes in the front as well as in the back so that it has a beautiful, clean appearance. Imagine stringing several of these apples together, maybe some with cheeky faces, some with the open face apple, or you can even leave the face off and just do apples in lots of different colors and making a banner for a classroom. Maybe you are a teacher or you know a teacher, or it would be a fantastic teacher gift. You could very easily make some fun little banners to gift to that favorite teacher in your life. As I get back to where I've started and I've filled in all of those holes, I'm going to come out in between the 2 layers and I am going to tie a little knot. That knot's going to settle in between the 2 felt layers. I'm going to cut that close and then it will kind of hide in between the 2 layers of felt. So here is my finished apple. Let's go ahead and work on our cheeky face apple now. You can see that I've got all of my little cute die cut pieces here. For this one, we are going to do a very simple stitching where we're just going to sandwich the stem and the arms in between the layers of the apple and stitch all the way around the perimeter, just like we did for the first apple. This time, we are not doing any of that pre-stitching work because we're going to be gluing on the cheeks, the eyes, and the mouth. Now, if you want to, you could stitch those in place, and you would want to do that before you start stitching the perimeter of the apple. Let's go ahead and stitch that up, and then we'll be back to finish with the leaves, face, and flowers. The leaves for this are stitched just like any of the other leaves from the Felt Stitch and Create line. For each of these independent leaves, I go ahead and die cut 2 of the shapes, place them back to back, and then I like to stitch up the center of the leaf every other stitching hole. Then I reverse, and as I come back down the center, I go out to the veining in each of the leaves. So you'll notice as I'm coming back, then I will go out to the sides. Now, some of the leaves may only have that center veining. That's going to be a little bit more simple. So I did the center for this one, and then I'm stitching the perimeter up and down every other stitching hole. The fun thing about this set is there's 2 different leaf designs, which gives you a little bit more versatility. We're going to be attaching the leaves to our apples using a little bit of liquid or hot glue. Full disclosure, I generally use hot glue, but if hot glue is not your thing and not your friend, go ahead and use a glue that is great for fabric stitching like Aleene's. Again, I've matched my floss to the project and I am stitching up and down every other hole using 3 strands of embroidery floss. For the leaves, I did start at the back instead of in between the two layers because I can simply tie it in a little knot when I'm done, snip it close to the knot, and then we're gluing it to the front of the apple. No one is ever going to see the little knot. When I'm stitching these felt projects, I always try to keep in mind, how can I hide my knots and the ends or starts of my threads so that they aren't visible on the finished project. We'll finish coming around here, and I'll show you how I tie that off. Then we're going to get to create the adorable little flowers with that little loopy center, which are absolutely my favorite. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this flower can be combined with any of my previous Felt Stitch and Create sets to create beautiful florals in all kinds of different ways. And you can also take florals from those sets and use them with these new summer Felt Stitch and Create sets as well. Mix and match. You definitely don't have to use everything from one set, and just use it as is. Okay, here is my hot glue. I have this little hot glue pen. I'm going to put a little bit of glue here, and we are going to glue the stems to the top of our apples, or leaves to the top of our apples, just like so. So cute. Then we are going to take our flower center. Now this flower is so cute. You can kind of fold it, as you can see. You can maybe glue it a little bit if you want, kind of overlapping the petals of the flower. I'm just kind of using my fingers. Then for the flower center, you want to fold it in half lengthwise, and then you're going to tightly roll this up, or not so tightly, however you want to do it, between your fingers. And I put a little glue here at the end, and we're going to pinch that and secure it to make this adorable loopy little flower center. Then I'm going to go ahead and put a little glue, I guess I'll put it on the flower, and then we're just going to pop our center right there into the little bloom here on our flower. And then I'm just going to put a little more glue in here to give my flower a little more shape. This hot glue pen is great because it just gives out a tiny little bit of glue. And then we're going to hot glue it to the top of our apple. You guys, how adorable is that little flower? It just makes the whole thing. Now, of course, our cheeky apple needs one too. She needs a cute little flower there at the top of her stem. So we're going to secure the other flower just like we did before. I'm going to put a little glue in the center of my flower. You don't need a ton. And just like I did for the first one, I'm going to put a little additional glue down near the base of the flower center and then kind of pinch the petals up towards the loops to give it a little bit of dimension, and then we're going to glue it in place. The final things we have to add to our cheeky apple are, of course, the eyes, cheeks, and mouth. We are going to kind of lay the pieces out. That looks pretty good. So we're going to go with that, and I'm going to glue the mouth down. Make sure it's pressed good and in place. I'm going to do some little cheeks. I'm not going to worry about that little string on the hot glue until it's dry a little bit, and then I can peel that off. We've got our cute little cheeks, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the eyes. And same thing, we're going to have a little string from the hot glue, but I'll let that cool, and then I can peel that away. Look at the adorable little face. Now you can always replace the eyes with little mini buttons. You could stitch the cheeks, you could stitch the mouth, make it your own, and have fun creating with the Felt Stitch and Create Summer Release Felt Cheeky Apple. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this video tutorial. And be sure to check out the Spellbinders YouTube channel for more inspiration for all of the summer Felt Stitch and Create sets, as well as any of the previously released Felt Stitch and Create dies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.